Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. We are talking shocks today. Before we do that, as always, check out Axial and RC. You can find them on Facebook. And also check out Darkside 3D Printing. You can find them on Facebook as well. So our topic of shocks. This video is not going to be on any of the following. It's not how to build a shock properly. It's not how to make a shock that leaks like a sieve, not leak like a sieve. And it's not about, this is the shock you should buy, these are awesome, because that's not what this is. Okay, this is just, I think, a misconception that some people have. And I just want to bring it to light. And I'm not saying you need to do this. By all means, don't go off of that. That's putting words in my mouth. But I'm just bringing it to light so you're aware of it. And I did this. There is better shocks for me to be running on my TF2, but I'm going to show you the reason I run the shock I do. And yes. So, we have 4 shocks on the table right now. This one kind of blends in with the back. Thankfully, it's dirty enough you can see it. So, the 3 on the right, they are all 90mm shocks. They should look very, very, very familiar to you. The one on the left, if you're not familiar with it, it is a 80mm RC 4-wheel drive shock. These were what come with the Marlin crawler. It is literally exactly 80mm from the center to the center of both ends. That is its true measurement, as well as these are truly 90mm. If you take the center of the top to the center of the bottom, fully extended, 90mm on the dot for all 3 of them. So we have an associated, the beloved Traxxas, and the Axial shock, kit shock out of their kits. So, what we're talking about today is travel, okay? Just because you have a 90mm shock does not mean it has the same travel as your buddy's 90mm shock by a different manufacturer. If you have multiple manufacturers of trucks and you have the RTR shocks and you're running what came with it, there's a good chance, unless they're the same brand, but there's a good chance that the shocks, if they're a different brand of trucks and the same length, say 90mm, there's a good chance they are not the same travel. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, first, this is my favorite shock for my TF2. And we're going to get into that very quickly here. We have an 80mm shock. All right. You would think an 80mm shock would be the smallest whenever it's compressed. That would be a lie. It is the exact same size as Mr. Axial's. And to prove, I tried doing this with dial calipers in the camera multiple times before I did the actual video, and it wouldn't work. Sorry, my lighting just wouldn't let it do it, reflected back at me. You're going to have to take my word for it. What you can see there's 10mm difference. They are right on the money. 80, 90, on the money. However, whenever they're compressed, guess what, folks? They are the exact, on the money, length, eye to eye. On the money. This is a 90mm shock. This is an 80mm shock. They are the exact same length compressed. No BS. If we take that shock, the same Axial shock, TRX4 shock, fully open, exact same length. They're 90, center to center, I promise. If we take them, and we compress them both fully, alright, I'm going to try to get this lined up. This is a pain for me, sorry. We can see a major difference here, okay? Fully compressed. They are both fully compressed. Tops are lined up. We see a major difference in how much travel we get. Okay, that is the design of the shock themselves. How they're designed, where the piston is traveling to, and its stopping point. We hold that same shock up to nice new associated shocks. We're going to get a similar effect, but not as dramatic. I know exactly where these have to be to line up perfect. Right there is perfect. Okay, see the difference there? There is 3mm difference between this shock and this shock fully compressed. This shock and the axial shock, fully compressed, believe it or not, is a full 7 millimeters. Okay? Which, it's obvious. You can see it. It's right there. All right? That's your 7 millimeters difference. No BS. I'm not lying to you. The reason I run this, and if anybody knows anything about TF2s, I run AR-44s. I needed longer because of where my mount is for the shock. It's on the Leaf mount from Jack Racing. So that's lower than what the original factory mount used to be on the Yoda 2 axles. What this shock does is I needed to keep, because I don't want to push my center of gravity lower, or higher I should say, by having a shock. Because let's face it, if I put these shocks, which are amazing shocks, if I put them on my TF2, my rear suspension can only compress to that point. This one gives me a whopping 7 millimeters more and puts me right back where the factory shock was. So I don't lose any up travel with this. With all these other shocks that are 90 millimeters, I lose up travel because of the design of the shock. Now, I'm not saying run out and buy a whole bunch of these, because yes, they leak like a sieve. They're not the most durable thing. They are not the best shock by any stretch of the imagination. But in my application, it does exactly what I need it to do. It also, by doing that, say if I took my TRX4, okay? And, we all like to run, as you can see right here's where I run my springs on my TRX4. It basically, the shock itself is 3/4 compressed at all times, all right? That 3/4 compressed on this shock compared to this shock is a dramatic difference. That equals center of gravity, okay? So if I wanted to put, now you got to keep in mind, do you have enough link clearance to run a different shock that gives you more up travel? Let's face it, some of the panhard bars go right across the diff covers. Things of that nature. So you always don't have that travel available to you. But for instance, the rears a lot of times do. So, that allows you to run a lower center of gravity in the rear if you're running a more drooped out setup, okay? So that's just kind of a little, I think a lot of people miss that. They get 90 millimeter shocks and they think that they have the exact same travel that they used to have, and they never really look at it or compare it. So I just wanted to bring it to light a little bit. And I made this little graph. Now I have G-made shocks and everything else, but I thought at 4 shocks, we're kind of getting a little overkill past that point. I don't need to give you every shock manufacturer out there, nor do I have every shock manufacturer out there. So we have the good old axial shock in this column, beloved Traxxas shock in this one, beloved RC 4-wheel drive in this one, or not so beloved I should say, and the associated, which seems smooth but hasn't proven itself as of yet for this particular model. So these are true numbers. All right, all measurements are done in millimeters. So we can see straight out Traxxas. These are real numbers, compressed, extended the whole way. All right, everything is real, and our travel is over here. We can see the axial gives us 30 millimeters of travel, followed by the associated with 27 and the Traxxas with 24. The RC 4-wheel drive only gives us 20, nor do we expect to give us much more than 20, considering the fact it's only an 80 millimeter shock. So that is true numbers. That is what we have. I'm not saying go out and buy these or that you need more travel. I'm not telling you that. All I'm saying is if you're swapping from one brand of shock to another brand of shock, make sure you're not hurting yourself with the travel if you were good where you was with the travel you had. That's all I'm saying. Or in my case, with my TF2, which was a more of a different situation than what some of you may get into, I needed to keep it to where it compressed fully where it was, because my leaf springs only come down so far, guys. Okay, the leaf springs are only going to come down so far because they are attached at the front and rear of the leaf. They only push down so far. So I need to make sure I keep my travel, and that shock works perfect for it. So that is why you will probably always see axial shocks on my TF2. That's the reason behind it, so now you know. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you know of a shock that is of better quality than the axial that gives you these same results, hey, if we're within a millimeter, we're within a millimeter, right? Hey, if it's a better shock, by all means, throw it in the comments. So thanks for watching. Take care. Enjoy life. Catch you next time.